Picture a family in 1965. A father works one job, not a remarkable job, just a steady one, and within that single income, a house gets bought. Not rented, bought, a few decades of mortgage payments, and the family owns a piece of the world. Now picture that same house today. Same walls, same neighborhood, maybe a little older. To buy it now, you need two incomes, both stretched to their limit. Both committed for 30 years to a debt that dwarfs anything that single father could have imagined. So here's the question that should bother you. Did we forget how to build houses? Did wood become rarer? Did concrete become a luxury good? No. The house didn't change. The money did. What you're looking at isn't a housing shortage. It's a liquidity flood. And the house just happens to be standing in the path of it. Somewhere along the way, a house stopped being a shelter and became something else entirely. A container, a vault, a place for excess money to sit and wait. The house became the new gold. Let's sit with that for a moment because it reframes everything. Gold has always played a particular role in the financial world. When currencies lose credibility, when too much money gets created relative to the things it can buy, capital goes looking for something that can't be diluted. Something with a fixed, stubborn scarcity. For most of history, that something was gold. But gold has a problem. It doesn't do anything. It sits in a vault. It produces no income, serves no function, houses no one. For modern capital that wants to hide and grow at the same time, gold is a little too passive. Housing solves that problem elegantly. It's scarce because land is finite and zoning makes it more finite still. It's essential because everyone needs to live somewhere. And it's subsidized because governments treat homeownership as a near sacred policy goal, propping up its value with tax breaks, guarantees, and cheap credit. Scarce, essential, and protected by the state. That's not an asset class. That's the perfect asset class. So when someone buys a house, they think they're buying square footage. Bedrooms, a yard, a kitchen. But for an enormous amount of capital flowing into housing markets, that's not what's being purchased at all. What's being purchased is a hedge, a position taken against the slow, steady erosion of what money is worth. And here's the quiet shift that changes everything. Housing prices used to track incomes. If wages rose 3% a year, home prices rose roughly in line with that. There was a relationship, a tether between what people earned and what shelter cost. That tether has snapped. Housing now tracks liquidity, the sheer volume of money sloshing through the system, far more than it tracks what ordinary people actually bring home. Wages crawl, money supply sprints, and housing runs with the money supply dragging affordability behind it like a tin can on a string. Which brings us to the engine room, because to understand why housing absorbs so much of this liquidity, you have to understand where most new money actually comes from. It doesn't come from central banks printing bills, despite the popular image. It comes from commercial banks issuing loans. And the single largest category of loans in most developed economies is mortgages. Every time a bank approves a mortgage, new money is created and immediately placed into the housing market as a bid. Think about what that means. A mortgage isn't just a personal transaction between you and a bank. It's an injection of fresh money directly into the price discovery mechanism for housing. And here's the loop that makes it self-reinforcing. More mortgage lending pushes prices up. Higher prices require larger mortgages to clear. Larger mortgages create more money. More money pushes prices up further. The house isn't appreciating. The unit of measurement is depreciating. You're not watching the value of a house rise. You're watching the value of currency fall, measured in houses. And if that dynamic involved only households and banks, it would already be difficult enough. But there's another layer above that. One most families never see coming until it's already reshaping their street. Over the past decade, a new kind of buyer has entered residential markets at scale. Institutional capital, investment funds, private equity firms, asset managers, entities with access to the kind of financing that no household could ever match. They're not shopping for a home. They have no sentimental attachment to a school district or a garden. What they're shopping for is yield, a predictable income stream, extracted from rent, backed by an asset that, as we've just established, is structurally protected from collapse. These buyers sit closer to the source of credit creation than ordinary families do. They can borrow larger amounts at better terms, faster, with fewer emotional hesitations. When a family and an institutional buyer compete for the same property, it isn't really a contest. It's a mismatch in firepower. One side is bidding with a paycheck. The other is bidding with access to the upper layers of the financial system itself. The cumulative effect, repeated across thousands of transactions, is a quiet but profound shift. A population that once expected to own gradually becomes a population that rents. Not because anyone announced this transition. Just because, deal by deal, the math stopped working for one side. Now here's the part that should genuinely unsettle you. Not because it's a conspiracy, but because it's structural. Why doesn't anyone fix this? Why don't governments simply let prices fall back to something closer to what wages can support? Because they can't. Not without consequences that ripple through the entire financial system. Remember, money in this system is debt. Mortgages are debt. And that debt sits on the balance sheets of banks as assets. Assets backed by collateral. And that collateral is the housing stock itself. If home prices fall sharply, the value of that collateral falls with them. Loans that once looked safe suddenly look shaky. Banks that look solvent on paper suddenly look exposed. A housing crash isn't just bad news for homeowners. It's a direct threat to the foundation the banking system is built on. So affordability becomes the pressure valve. It's the variable that's allowed to suffer because the alternative, a genuine sustained fall in housing prices, threatens something the system considers non-negotiable: the stability of the banking sector itself. Prices are permitted to be unreachable. They are not permitted to meaningfully fall. The system isn't choosing cruelty. It's choosing which fragility it can tolerate. And ordinary affordability simply isn't load-bearing in the way bank solvency is. Which leads to the part of this story that's hardest to hear because it's not about policy failures or bad luck. It's about which side of the ledger you happen to stand on. If you own assets, property, equities, anything that moves with the tide of monetary expansion, this entire system works in your favor. Inflation doesn't erode your position, it inflates it. The money creation we've been describing flows toward what you already hold, lifting its price right alongside everything else. But if your primary asset is your labor, if your income comes from a salary, paid in the same currency that's steadily being diluted, you're not really in a housing market at all. You're in a race, and your opponent isn't the family down the street trying to buy the same house you are. Your opponent is the aggregate lending capacity of the global financial system, a force that creates new purchasing power faster than your wages can ever grow. It's not a fair race. It was never designed to be a race you could win by working harder. It's a race against a mechanism, and mechanisms don't get tired. So let's come back to where we started. The grandparents' house, bought on one income all those decades ago. That house wasn't more affordable because the world was simpler, or because people were more frugal, or because builders were more efficient. It was affordable because money at that time was closer to representing actual labor and actual production. The further money drifts from that anchor, the more housing, scarce, essential, state protected, becomes the place where that drift gets expressed. A house is no longer a place to live. It is a mirror of the monetary system's expansion, reflecting back at us in brick and mortgage paperwork just how much new money has been created and where it chose to land. Once you see the architecture, you stop waiting for a crash. The crash isn't coming because the system can't allow it. Instead, you start asking a quieter, more uncomfortable question. Who was this game actually built for? Visible at last,